My name is Ingegerd Kastanrazi, and you are listening to Inge Reads. In this section, I will be starting part 8 of the series, where Inge reads the Marshal's Handbook, July 2020 edition. This section starts on page 35, and this is the beginning of the second half of the Marshal's Handbook, labeled as the Marshal section. To listen to recordings of the participant section, please go to my YouTube channel to listen to those sections. We'll begin on page 35, Roman numeral X, Procedures for the Authorization of Marshals. A. General requirements. There are 3 near equal priorities in marshaling: safety, fair witness, and showmanship. Overemphasizing any one of these at the expense of the others will tend to make the fighting less enjoyable for everyone. Although, if you must go overboard on one, pick safety. A1. A marshal may be authorized after demonstrating the ability to oversee combat, judge a fighter's authorization, and inspect weapons and armor. A2. Unless warranted or rostered by the Earl Marshal as an officer of the kingdom, a marshal may not be the marshal in charge or MIC of an event or sign the paperwork to authorize fighters. A3. Kingdoms may have other types of marshals other than authorized marshals, local, night marshals, constables, etc., as they see fit. These individuals may be warranted or rostered by the Earl Marshal of the kingdom. However, unless the marshal has undergone a marshal's authorization, they shall not give final approval of the suitability of weapons or armor, or be involved in the authorization of combat participants. A4. Only the Earl Marshal or designated Deputy Earl Marshal or Marshals may perform a marshal's authorization. They must witness the authorization and execute the appropriate paperwork to ensure that the authorization is registered. At a minimum, a marshal's authorization shall include the following. 5. The candidate must have good working knowledge of the rules of the lists, the Society Conventions of Combat, and any additional kingdom rules or conventions. 5A. The candidate must be willing to enforce the rules of the lists, the Society Conventions of Combat, and any additional kingdom rules or conventions. 6. The candidate must have a good working knowledge of the Society minimum armor and weapons standards and any additional kingdom armor and weapons standards. 7. The candidate must demonstrate the ability to conduct an inspection of armor and weapons for use in combat. 8. The candidate must demonstrate the ability to conduct an inspection of combatants. 9. The candidate must demonstrate the ability to safely control SCA combat, whether this is single combat, team combat, general melee, or part of a war environment. 10. The term Knight Marshal applies to the marshal of a branch. This title of office is used regardless of whether the marshal is a belted fighter. In fact, it is used whether or not the branch marshal is an authorized fighter. 11. All warranted or rostered marshals shall be members of the Society for Creative Anachronism, Incorporated. Roman numeral 11. Procedures for marshaling wars. A. Before the war. A1. The general rules under which the war will be conducted, compromises between conflicting kingdom standards, and the scenario limits for each planned battle shall be negotiated and agreed to in writing in advance by the authorized representatives of all belligerent groups involved. The rules and scenario limits shall be published in the appropriate newsletters. For inter-kingdom wars, notice shall be published according to SCA publication policy by the groups involved. This publication should take place at least 30 days prior to the event. In addition, copies of all of the rules and agreements shall be available on site as a handout for people who do not receive or did not read the newsletters. Armor and weapons standards shall default to the established society minimum standards, unless otherwise specified in the event rules and scenario limits. 2. Each side in a battle shall provide a reasonable number of trained and experienced marshals. If not enough marshals are available, the sides should arrange for a draft from their armies. 3. All marshals should be separately briefed prior to the meeting of all participants. They should also attend the group briefing. Emphasis at this briefing should be on enforcing the rules and scenario limits for each battle and on preventing accidents that could arise from hazards related to the scenario limits and to the actual terrain. There should be an understanding among the marshals regarding the rules and scenario specifics and any possible safety issues that may arise. At inter-kingdom events, the differences between the attending kingdoms should be discussed, and compromises and clarity in the rules and scenarios regarding those differences should be worked out. 4. All participants shall be gathered to hear the rules and the scenario limits explained to them. The event stewards and or the marshals should answer their questions. If the scenario limits vary radically from battle to battle, this procedure should be repeated before each battle. 5. Equipment inspection must take place before combat starts, with particular emphasis on any modifications that have been made in the process of making compromises between conflicting kingdom standards. B. Marshal of a war. B1. A supervising marshal or marshal in charge shall be chosen for each war, and possibly for each battle. If the MIC, or marshal in charge for the war, is fighting in the battles, or otherwise prevented from being present. B1A. The marshal in charge shall be responsible for the activities of the marshals in his charge. B2. The marshal in charge for a particular battle may not participate in the battle as a combatant. B3. When hold is called, all fighting shall cease. B3A. Fighters shall drop to one knee, if possible, where they stand. B4. Conversations relating to the conduct of the battle are not permitted between combatants. B5. Changes of position/location are not permitted unless ordered by a marshal. B6. If movement away from a boundary of a hazard is necessary, the fighters shall maintain their relative positions and distances. B7. To end a hold, the marshal in charge will call, "All rise," or "Rise if you're able," or some other equivalent statement. When the combatants have resumed their guard, the marshal in charge will call, "Lay on," to signal the resumption of the fight. 8. Hold will normally be called only for broken armor, lost tempers, injuries, safety concerns, outsiders wandering onto the field, fighters about to wander off it, or to enforce the rules and scenario limits. 9. Hold should not be called for dropped weapons, fighters who have slipped and fallen unless they are in danger of injury, or the near approach of a fighter to a boundary where there are neither spectators nor any natural hazards such as cliffs. 10. Marshals have the preemptory authority to remove from combat and from the field any combatant who violates the rules or scenario limits or performs any unsafe or dishonorable act. Such removal may be discussed during the battle only if the marshal permits it. The marshal's ruling may be appealed to the marshal in charge. 11. Marshals have the authority to regulate the movement of non-combatants on and near the field and to control the location of spectators. 12. Those marshals who are responsible for marshaling wars or large melees may use alternative means to signal hold or lay on, as long as all fighters and marshals know and understand the alternative signaling system. Marshals may use whistles, air horns, or other such devices. Roman numeral section 12, marshalling requirements. A. When combatant archery is present on the field, all marshals, heralds, etc. on the field must wear protective shatterproof eyewear, such as safety glasses meeting the ANSI Z87.1 standard or better. B. A buffer zone needs to be provided between the edges of the battlefield and spectators at all times. This needs to be increased when combat archery is included. The marshal in charge must ensure that it is a safe distance. It should not be possible to hit a spectator either with direct fire or with a bounced arrow, taking into account the type of scenario to minimize the chances of deflected shots traveling into the spectators. Physical barriers may eliminate the need for a buffer zone or lessen the distance needed. Roman numeral 13, combat injury procedures. A. When an injury occurs on the field, it should always be remembered that the primary concern is getting to and assisting the injured party. Secondary to this objective, but no less important, is the safety of persons entering the field to help and the well-being of anyone already on the field. For example, fighters standing around in armor in the sun could be subject to heat problems. B. All injuries that require hospitalization or similar care include a period of unconsciousness or may require future medical care need to be reported to your Kingdom Earl Marshal within 24 hours of the incident. Include all available details in the report. C. In the event of an emergency, the Marshal shall cooperate with any authorized persons responding to the emergency and keep the area clear of would-be spectators. D. In the event of any suspected injury on the field, the Marshal shall halt all fighting in the area and determine the proper course of action. The hold may be a local hold, as long as the safety of the injured person can be maintained. The overall situation should be assessed, and, as the injured party is tended to, every effort shall be made to release as much of the field as possible so that combat may proceed. E. If the injured person is conscious, they may be asked if they would like assistance. No conscious person will be forced to accept treatment without his or her consent. No non-combatant shall enter the combat area until summoned by a marshal. F. A marshal shall call for assistance if they suspect that a participant is experiencing more than momentary distress. It is an extremely serious matter to delay the application of first aid when it is needed, and marshals who ignore injuries may be subject to revocation of their authorization to supervise combat-related activities. G. No one may remove an injured fighter from the field without the consent of the event marshal in charge or an appointed deputy. H. Any immediate and significant problems associated with an injury on the field shall be reported to the Kingdom Earl Marshal. This concludes part 9 of this series on page 37 of the Marshal's Handbook July 2020 edition. Again, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or complaints regarding this recording, you may address them to me, Baroness Ingegerd Kastanrazi. I hail from the Kingdom of Atlantia. If you have any questions regarding the rules or policies, please refer to the Marshal's Handbook that is most current, as well as your own kingdom's rules and policies, and check with your local marshals. And I hope you have a great day.